Hi there, and welcome to another episode of Tales from the Tank. Today I want to share a few tips, things I've learned in the 5 years that I've been back into the hobby now, and there will be 10 tips, and if I think of more along the way, there might be bonus tips. I will talk about tips in relation to tank size, filtration, tank setup, livestock maintenance, tools, and chemicals. Enjoy! The first tips are on tank size, and here, while this is largely budget driven, I'm going to show you around a few options and what the associated cost with those is, and some pros and cons of those sizes. Let's have a look. Apologies for the reflections, but this is a little 20-liter Kmart tank, for example. My reckoning is that's a bit small when you start out with, but it does the trick, maybe for a better or something like that. I did some modifications with the filter here, just ignore that, that's all my doing. Originally they come in a little package, which gives you a little filter and a little gravel in garish colors, never mind. But it's cheap and cheerful, and it's about 20 liters, 30 centimeters wide, 25 tall, something like that. And does the job for a fish or two. You level up, you come up with something like this. This is a Flex 34 liters, and has a very large filter compartment relative to the size of the tank. So this is what I will refer to as overfiltering in a later tip. And with this one, you can house quite a few fish in there, maybe 6 cardinal tetras or something like that. Would do easily without too much trouble. As things escalated over the years, I then traded up to this 94-liter tank. This is fairly high for a tank with that kind of volume. I wouldn't do that again. I would always go for wider rather than this high. It's just harder to maintain this way, but doable if it stands in the right position. So this is the last option I can run past you. This is a 176-liter tank with external filtration. From here, sky's the limit. Whatever then your budget can bear, enjoy. So another thing around tank size, or the tank that you're getting, has to do with where you're going to put it, right? And there's a couple of things I've learned in terms of positioning that are probably good tips. One is, don't place it on a window which has midday sun coming through, because you will get trouble with algae and potentially really, really bad problems with algae. So stay away from direct sunlight. The other one is placing the aquarium opposite a window. In my experience has shown that a lot of fish then start to panic when you approach the tank, and they have this dark shadow looming over their tank because the window is behind you, and they all scatter and you don't see them. They're okay at night when the lights are on and the windows are dark, but during the day you might not be able to enjoy them that much, other than from the distance. So in my experience, the best position for the tank in the room is in a somewhat dark corner. The light from the tank will help enhance that corner as well. So if your layout of the room allows that, that's pretty much the best place it can be. And the last tip in relation to tank size is thinking about maintenance. And with that, really, how many buckets are you willing to lug around on a regular basis? Or do you have someone look after that for you and then go as big as your budget allows, I guess? But you will have to consider doing potentially weekly water changes with 20-30% of the water being replaced. And in 100-liter tanks, you're looking at 3 buckets every week. So if you're prepared to do that, or have a means that makes it easy, consider that. Now we're coming to a couple of tips around filtration. And the first one, as I learned, is to overfilter. That means to always use a larger filter than is considered adequate for the size tank you're having. Sometimes when you buy a kit, and it depends on the kit you buy, you come with a filtration system that is already a bit bigger than it needs to be. Other times, it's just only reaching the level of filtration that makes the tank work. And if you have filtration that isn't up to the task, you can end up with illness, you can end up with algae, all these kinds of problems. Overfiltration relative to the size of the tank and relative to the stock level that you're having, how many fish, how many livestock you have in your tank, is a good idea. The other tip around filtration, to keep the water really clear and also help with binding certain chemicals, I found a product called Purigen very useful. Again, there's other brands which provide something similar. I use Seachem Purigen, and that goes into the filter in a bag, and you get the water scrubbed basically on a very, very fine level. It's very useful. That needs to be replaced and refreshed regularly, and it is quite expensive. This here is 500 milliliters and costs about 50 Australian dollars, depending on the shop you're going to here in Australia. So it needs to be replaced maybe every 4 to 8 weeks, depending on how much work it has to do in your tank. So that's a budgeting consideration as well. And now for a couple of tips regarding the setup of the tank. The first one is around getting the biology going. When you set up a fresh tank, everything's new, everything's pretty much sterile, and nothing much is going on. And to get the water chemistry going, the cycle, which I'm talking about in another video soon, you want to put something in there that provides biological material. An easy way to do that is to just put a little bit of a pinch of food, fish food, into the tank. Just a few flakes, nothing more. That will decompose because there's yet nobody there to eat it. And as it decomposes, the bacteria that is inevitably around everywhere, in any case, will start multiplying and the whole cycle will start. That gets you quicker to the point where you need to be, which is a balanced tank. The other tip regarding the setup of the tank is, if you're looking to create a nice environment with hardscape, by hardscape I mean pieces of root, rocks, pebbles, that kind of thing, you want to arrange them in a particular way in your tank, then it's a good idea to keep them together and only the hardscape pieces together, not the hardscape against the aquarium, with super glue. It's perfectly safe to use in aquariums and keeps the hardscape from tumbling when you fill it all up. You can also glue pieces of plant to the hardscape that way. If you need to fix something to the glass of the aquarium, for example, to keep a rock in a particular position against the glass, don't use super glue because that's kind of forever. You run the risk of damaging the glass. But use silicone, but make sure you use silicone that's specific, safe for use in aquariums. Don't just use any that you can find in your hardware shop. Now for a tip regarding the livestock, the number of animals, the kind of animals you want to keep in your tank. The tip here is put fewer things in your tank than you think it can bear or you want in there. The more fish and other animals you have in there, the more waste you get, the more frequent the water changes, the quicker the water parameters go south. It's much easier to maintain, much healthier for the fish if you have fewer animals in the tank than nominally it could take. There are rules of thumb out there about centimeters per fish equaling liters per water. So if you have 50 liters of water, you have 50 centimeters of fish you can put in there. And by that we mean grown fish. If you go into a fish shop today and buy your fish, they're juveniles, they're young fish, they will grow bigger. And you want to know how big they're going to grow before you buy them. so that you can make the right considerations. So relative to these rules of thumb, keep fewer fish and other animals in the tank than it would normally take. And here's a tip for your regular maintenance, in particular the water changes. You will come across these siphoning hoses. I have modified mine a little bit with angles that it sits in the tank properly without me having to worry about jumping out. So that's pretty standard to use. One end goes into the tank, the other one you squeeze to get the water starting to flow into your bucket, which is lower than the tank level, and you're away emptying it. But for the refilling, what I found very useful is to use a pump. I replaced, as I mentioned in another video, the pumps in my fluval flexes with EHAM pumps, and so I have spare fluval flexes lying around. So I attach the hose to that, and that goes into the tank, secured with a clamp on the tank side, and then the pump sucks the water out of the bucket and back into the tank. You need to watch it, otherwise you end up with a puddle. But that works really well, and it's nice and fast and efficient. Now some tips around the tools. I would recommend you have at the ready when you do your maintenance for your tanks and look after them. So the first one is to use a scraper to clean the glass from the inside. Any algae that builds up, any other detritus you might want to clean up there. I do use the magnetic cleaners you can get, where one side of the magnet goes on the outside, the other one on the inside, and you go up and down and it cleans that way. They are okay. They don't work for any aquariums with curved glasses like I have with the flexes. So this is very traditional. It just has a razor blade at the top, but it works really well. This one here also unscrews back. And why is that important? Because sometimes, like in my case, I have a bit of an access issue, and with the shorter or shortened handle, I can actually get where I need to go. So that's the scraper. The other one is scissors. And then the scissors, I don't mean standard scissors. I mean scissors that are a bit longer, so you can get into your tank and cut dead leaves off and other things that you want to get rid of. Then you want tweezers, big tweezers, like this one. They come in a slightly smaller size as well. I think I have some just behind me, somewhere here. Yep. Like this, that's the junior of the same idea. To grab the stuff that you just cut out and get it out of the tank. What else? We have these, I don't know what to call them, spatulas, whatever. You can use to distribute your gravel, walk around in your tank and reorganize things whichever way you like. These three things are often sold in a set. Makes perfect present for the budding fish keeper. Another tool that I found useful for a variety of reasons is a turkey baster. So with this you can go into the tank and suck up very specific little things that you want to get rid of in the tank, and that can really help with keeping things organized and clean in there. And that's the tips around tools. And lastly, let's talk about water chemistry. It's an important topic if you want to keep your fish healthy and living a long time. So really necessary that you brush up on this. It's really not that difficult. There's a few things to learn about. I will make a separate video around that. But the first tip is learn about it. Educate yourself what is important to know about. One thing you will need in setting up the new tank is dechlorinator. I'm using something called Seachem Prime, like this here. Different brands are available, all do the same thing. They remove chlorine and chloramine, and they detoxify ammonia, nitrite and nitrate. That doesn't mean anything to you yet, these are the 3 chemicals to watch out for in the tank. In particular, the first 2, ammonia and nitrite, because they're very toxic for fish. Nitrate is also a plant food that is in higher concentration a problem for fish as well. This, when you first set up your tank, neutralizes these kinds of things in the tank before the tank can look after itself. Again, that separate video I'm going to do over what is known as cycling your tank. We'll explain all that in detail. With this dechlorinator, almost forgot to talk about that now, come instructions about using 5 milliliters for every 200 liters in the case of this one, for example. Now, when I started out, I actually had a little pipette and measured 5 milliliter of this, or much less in the case of my small tanks, to get it to the drop right. Meanwhile, I've learned as long as you have enough of it, so the minimum level, going a bit over, even double the dose that is required for your tank, doesn't harm anything. So these days, when I prepare a bucket of water with 10 liters and I go a little splash, I have on the top of this, I haven't removed the little aluminium. I just poked a couple of holes in it so I can just splash a few drops. And I know from experience now that this is the right amount, or a safe amount, let's say. Further on water chemistry, you want to get yourself some test strips to know what's going on. I have these water strips here, test strips here. They're from API. Again, you can get them from different manufacturers, different brands. That's what they look like. And they measure general hardness, carbonate hardness, pH, nitrates, and nitrates. And it's simple. Stick that in the water. Don't shake it off. Let it sit like this, and you can immediately read hardness and pH. And after 30 seconds, you can read against the color chart the nitrites and nitrates, and it tells you what's a safe level and what's not a safe level. And then you know. This is what I these days also use to determine when I need to do water changes. So when you start out, it's a good idea to do regular water changes, say every week. Just make sure everything's okay. As you move along, you will find that these values, in particularly nitrite and nitrate, can stay within bounds a bit longer, depending on your stock levels that I mentioned earlier in the video. And you may find, every fortnight water changes is actually okay. If you have a heavily planted tank with only a few fish relative to the amount of water, that may well be possible. Makes life easier for everybody. So that's the tip. And the final tip for today. So I hope you enjoyed these tips and can make use of them as you start out in the hobby, or maybe you have already started and have something going and took a few new things away from this. That would be great. Leave a comment, tell me what you think about all of this. If there's other things you want me to talk about, which I can do in a follow-up video with more tips, let me know. We'd love to interact with you that way. And otherwise, I'll see you for another tale from the tanks very soon. Bye now.